All right, welcome to the May 31 HealthTech Dose Explainer. Today, we're tackling one of the absolute most frustrating bottlenecks in all of digital health. I'm talking about the massive tension between demanding perfect, bulletproof governance and falling straight into the dreaded pilot trap. To make this complex source material really come alive, we're going to look at it through two very distinct perspectives that popped up in the research. First up is our enthusiast. We'll call him Leo. He's an optimistic futurist, totally focused on scaling AI across the entire healthcare ecosystem. And pushing right back is our skeptic, Sarah. She's a highly grounded, data-driven researcher, hyper-focused on strict compliance and, frankly, the actual manual toil of getting things implemented. So let's jump right in. Leo, taking that enthusiast role, poses a pretty provocative question. He asks, are you accidentally killing your best clinical AI initiatives simply because you're terrified of a little operational friction? His argument here is that our fear of friction is totally misplaced. We spend so much time trying to perfectly de-risk AI before it ever deploys that, well, actually, we just end up stuck in endless isolated pilots. His core thesis is fascinating. Operational friction isn't a failure. It's actually a generative feature. It's the essential real-world stress test we absolutely need to build durable accountability. Basically, he's saying we've got to stop performing these random acts of intelligence and let a little friction help us build real, scalable systems. Section 1. Escaping the pilot trap. Now, naturally, Sarah steps in as the skeptic. She wants grounded, data-driven proof before we start throwing any parades. And to answer her, Leo brings his anchor evidence straight to the table. He points to a massive 18-month real-world implementation of a clinical AI platform at a tertiary hospital in China. And guys, this wasn't just some tiny, safe sandbox. They successfully scaled an intelligent pre-consultation pathway to over 24,000 interactions. 24,000! That is serious scale. And for Leo, it proves that completely escaping the pilot trap is in fact absolutely possible under the right conditions. Okay, so the million-dollar question, how did they actually pull it off? Well, Leo breaks down how this specific institution bypassed the pilot trap by allowing 6 independent governance modules to emerge dynamically during active deployment. They absolutely did not have some perfect top-down rulebook on day one. Nope. Instead, through that operational friction we talked about, they organically developed these modules. Things like institutional carrier formation, which is basically just creating a stable organizational home for the AI, along with infrastructure governance, regulatory alignment, and lifecycle oversight. The key takeaway? The governance was built entirely through the implementation itself, not before it. Section 2. Friction as a feature. Because as Sarah rightly points out, unmanaged operational friction isn't exactly a cute feature. It's a massive, dangerous liability when real patient data is involved. To satisfy those very real compliance concerns, Leo introduces this great concept, the go-live minimum. He explains that you don't need a flawlessly mature governance structure to start, but you absolutely do need strict regulatory authorization right out of the gate. Think of it like bumper bowling for AI. By establishing these rigid, non-negotiable regulatory guardrails before you activate, you create a totally safe sandbox. And inside that sandbox, the daily operational friction can safely shape your cross-functional governance over time without anyone ever crossing the red lines. Which leads us to a crucial thought. As the research notes, once we have those boundaries set, the next question is how we scale this across our R&D pipeline without burning our entire capital budget. By highlighting this specific transition, Leo pivots the whole debate. We're moving away from just how do we get the AI turned on and zooming in on the very real cost and infrastructure realities of deploying this stuff across an entire ecosystem. Section 3. Overcoming legacy data silos. Think about it. If every single hospital has to build a multi-million-dollar supercomputer just to run clinical AI, the revolution is pretty much over before it even begins, right? So Leo pitches this really fascinating concept to solve it, functional transferability. Put simply, institutions do not need to build massive localized server farms. Instead, governance functions, things like accountability and access control, can safely transfer to shared cloud-based infrastructures, meaning you can actually scale clinical AI without owning all the heavy-duty hardware yourself. It's a real game changer. But wait, Sarah aggressively counters here. She is quick to remind us that the cloud doesn't just magically fix messy data. Not even close. The system architect still has to overcome those notorious legacy data silos, which, let's be honest, are the true graveyards of good hospital intentions. You still have to build highly standardized, interoperable pipelines before any of these automated systems can even function. And that requires an immense amount of unglamorous, manual toil. There's just no way around it. And as Sarah so sharply puts it, if we can efficiently scale and standardize our data, our final hurdle is avoiding the bureaucratic nightmare of overseeing these dynamic tools in the wild. She uses this powerful statement to set up the next critical vulnerability. It moves our explainer right into the ongoing, frankly messy challenge of real-world post-deployment AI oversight. Section 4. Lifecycle Governance and Risk. Sarah issues a huge warning here. We're trying to oversee constantly evolving generative AI models using static, one-and-done approval processes that were designed for things like hospital hardware. It just doesn't make sense. Leo responds to this mismatch by advocating for what he calls governance fit. Basically, to prevent endless administrative nightmares, oversight has to be precisely calibrated based on two key things: clinical risk and update frequency. You obviously don't need a massive committee review just to tweak a prompt on an educational app, but you absolutely do for a major diagnostic algorithm update. This targeted approach is what drives long-term capability building. To make this actually work, Leo walks us through a highly practical tool from the research, the Risk and Ethics Matrix. It's pretty straightforward, but super effective. On the vertical axis, institutions map the residual clinical risk, everything from low to extreme. Then, on the horizontal axis, they plot ethical alignment. Intersecting these two gives you incredibly clear, actionable dispositions. You either encourage, permit with oversight, restrict, or prohibit. It allows institutions to make continuous, highly auditable deployment decisions without reinventing the wheel every single time an update drops. Now, to make that matrix actually function, Leo briefly defines the Ethical Alignment Score, or the EAS. It's a 0 to 8 scale, and what it does is take these highly abstract ethical principles, things like autonomy, beneficence, non-maleficence, and justice, and transforms them into actionable, measurable metrics. This is the secret sauce that enables those targeted, augmented re-reviews. It literally turns ethics from a vague philosophical debate into a concrete operational checklist. Section 5. The Evidence Blind Spots. But our skeptic Sarah is definitely not letting Leo off the hook just yet. First, Leo highlights the foundational study's highly optimistic conclusion. He proudly asserts that they've mapped out the exact functional arrangements needed to escape the pilot trap through emergent, frictionless governance. Sounds amazing, right? Like a complete, total victory for the enthusiast camp? But brace yourselves, because the reality check is coming in hot. Because right here is where Sarah delivers her skeptical takedown. She explicitly points out the massive, glaring blind spots in this research. First, there's a total lack of generalizability. Remember, this was a single institutional case study operating in a very specific regulatory environment in China. Second, and this is the big one, there is a total absence of empirical data linking this governance framework to actual, proven, clinical patient outcomes. We don't know if patients actually got better. And third, there are completely missing economic analyses. We literally have zero idea what these dynamic governance configurations actually cost to maintain in the real world. So, Sarah leaves the audience with this incredibly sobering thought. Without any real economic proofs and without concrete patient outcomes, are we really making progress, or are we just swapping the pilot trap for a governance illusion? She argues that without the hard data, this entire framework might just be a highly bureaucratic way to perform those random acts of intelligence we talked about earlier, just dressed up to look like institutional progress. Which brings us to the end of today's explainer. We want to close by challenging you, the healthcare leaders watching this, to really synthesize these two competing views. Because Leo is definitely right that we've got to embrace operational friction to let real governance emerge and scale. But Sarah is equally right that we must critically demand hard evidence of clinical and economic viability before we celebrate. So ask yourself, how are you going to strike that balance in your own system? Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. Until next time, keep questioning and keep innovating.